INCRadio, DCEM 954, the voice of truth, the official radio station of the Church of Christ or Iglesia ni Cristo.
Don't underestimate
the power
of a single
conversation.
It could change your whole life.
INCRadio Chatline.
conversations that matter.
This is what I ask. Let me always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I bring my last.
Hello, everyone who's tuning into another broadcast of INC Radio Chatline, where we like to have conversations that matter. I'm Tony Rose Valenzuela, and I'm your host for today. I'm not by myself. I have my good friend who's over there in Illinois, and I'm here in Michigan. We're separate virtually, but we're going to be having the conversation still together today. Let's say hi to him.
Yes, hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm John Cruz live here from Rockford, Illinois. Also here in the District of Great Lakes. I would say about maybe 6 hours from Michigan. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 6 hours. I'm trying to remember when
I think it's
I was.
five. It doesn't take that long. Doesn't take that long, but distance is not doesn't put a hamper on being able to have good conversations, right? And our topic for today, if you didn't catch it on the thumbnail or maybe the title there on YouTube, for those who are listening to us right now, we're talking about decision making. And this is something that we kind of do all the time, every day. Even right now, as I'm speaking to you, there's constant decisions that are going back and forth in my mind. Like, am I going to say this? Am I going to say this? What kind of movement? Sometimes it's, very quick. You don't really get a second to pause too much before you have to make a decision. But sometimes there are decisions that take a little bit more time in terms of how are we going to go about it, right? So we're going to talk about that today, how we can make good decisions and the potential challenges that come with that as well, because there are challenges that we do face when we make decisions. Doesn't matter if it's a small decision, could be a small decision as simple as figuring out what you want to eat for dinner, right? That's one of the big things. Everyone's like, what am I going to eat for dinner tonight? That's
I think
always a
there's two side dishes that you can choose from.
Yeah, it's sometimes the amount of choices can make it difficult. At least just speaking from my experience for food when it comes to food. So it's that end of the spectrum and then even, bigger life decisions that we may be making. So for you, EJ, what kind of, I guess, important life decisions where, and I put it in quotations there because I feel like that's subjective for everyone in terms of how different levels of important life decisions. What are some important life decisions that you've had to make? Doesn't have to be necessarily recently, just in general, important decisions that you've had to make. What were they? What examples can you give?
Actually, I love that you highlighted that it's subjective because for me, the terms in terms of what important is the decisions that you can take back. So I'm gonna say, or what I'm gonna count as important. Because let's say okay, uh, getting right into it, marriage is definitely a big a big decision that you can't take back, right? So it's very important to be for me, that's an important life choice that I have to be really really aware of, really really sure of. Definitely also the things that would you that you can't take back, but it takes a lot of effort. It probably would erase a lot of work that you might have already, or progress you
More
might
like
have
work.
done towards it. Yeah, let's say in when you were taking a course and then you switch courses midway, right? There's gonna be some changes. I wouldn't necessarily say wasted effort because there's still something that you learn, but there's definitely going to be a little bit of a shift that you have to do as well. But yeah, in terms of important decisions. Yeah, I would say like the ones where you can't really take it back is
Well, could you give an example of one that that you've kind of had to go back and forth about in terms of a decision that you had to make that's important?
I mentioned, but my courses in college, like I kind of switched to like different courses in the course of like my college years. I'm not, I know, I'm not even like finished yet with my college years because I like kept like switching courses, like because I this is something I wish I did. I wish I thought it out before I know before I graduated high school. I wish I thought about it like before that, because it wasn't until my final year in high school, like near the end of like the school year, where I started thinking, what would I do for college? Like, what do I want to do for college? Like, there's definitely things that I want to do, but uh, this is a callback to the previous episode. I didn't feel like I had the skill yet or the asset yet to to meet the requirements for that for that course. So, like I felt like maybe in those first few years, I kind of took some year off doing like a different course first before attempting to try again on the course that I really wanted to take.
Okay, so with that there, I just want to backtrack just a little bit, especially for those who are just tuning in with us. So I do agree with the point where there are some decisions where it's kind of hard that when you make it's hard to go back on it. In your example, though, I would say, especially for students who may be tuning in, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the decision that you can't take back, but the effects of the decision, right? Because you
Mm.
go through the courses and then you find out later, like, oh, I don't think because that people do that all the time. They switch majors, right? I
And
know a
there's,
lot of my
I would
friends who
say there's definitely still sometimes where you can still transfer your credits to
Mhm.
the other course, if it if it aligns, if like the subjects that you need to take for for both kind of align, you can still transfer the credits that you get, which I found out I found out switching courses. But yeah, it's one of those decisions where it would be hard to pivot, right? It would be hard to make a change to to that, right?
I guess the way that I would phrase it is decisions that have lasting effects that take like
Mm.
what you said that can take a little bit more work to rework them. I do want to revisit that a little bit later, but some of the things that I can think about, even for those who are there in Team Lime Chat, I do see some names there like Carolyn and Nathan. If you have things that you've had to decide about recently, aside from what you wanted to eat for breakfast, let us know what are some things that you've been trying to work through in terms of decisions. A recent decision for me was in terms of a career position. So it was one of those things of, am I going to take it or am I not going to take it? And a lot of things kind of go into that, right? So that's one example. You gave more of a student life example. Mine is more of like a career life example. And then I know you also mentioned marriage, so that's a potential decision that we have to think about too. When we're thinking about getting married, a lot of different kinds of decisions.
It
And
changes a lot of things. I would just want to add that it changes a lot of things about our life. I don't have the experience, but I do. Like my brother is married, so I have seen that like kind of like shift like in him, where it's like it changes a lot about it changes a lot in your life.
yeah, the decision making in general can I guess it has a lot that goes into it depending on what you're deciding on. I see in live chat, Nathan put he changed majors from TV production to film to engineering to mathematics. Wow, that's
He's really
that happens.
collecting all the skills.
Yeah, he's collecting all the skills for for everyone. So you kind of brought it up already, right? We recognize that there's decisions that we can make at any point in life that you're in. Those who are tuning in with us, you could be, in your high school, younger years, thinking of decisions to make potentially where to go to college. I know that's something that does come up. A lot of my friends lately have been sharing with me their decisions of what college they want to go to, and in terms of, other friends, different friends in different places in life, right? Different things that they're thinking about, right? Thinking about pursuing or thinking of taking on. And we do this all the time. But like what you said, EJ, sometimes there are things that kind of come up that make the process a little bit more challenging. So one challenge that you brought up is that idea of, I guess we can say, permanence, or um, the results of the decision that we kind of have to take with us in terms of whatever it was, like what you mentioned earlier in terms of your schooling, right? You were kind of going back and forth of what to decide, and when you go into it, when you take that course, typically you finish out that semester and you're like, I don't know if this is still if this is still what I want, right? So you kind of have to live with that part. So what other challenges have you encountered in terms of making a decision, or anyone in general, that maybe one of your friends that you kind of witnessed before?
This is something that I've noticed in like a couple of my friends and also in myself as well, is like that realization that taking something up can like really change a lot, like in your routine. Like if you have a routine, I would say like the first job that I ever worked, uh like I don't know how to I know how to exactly explain the thought that was going through my mind, like my first day of like working. But it was a mix of excitement and like and sadness in the way that uh I felt like there's like going to be like a big like change in like my routine in my day-to-day life, you know. Like like I don't I won't see my family as much on the, like every day. Because before I started working, even with my with my studies, you know, like I still saw them like a lot throughout the day. But when I took up the job, because it was a full-time job, like saw them I saw them less. So it was a difficult adjustment at first. And I would say like that realization that that you know, taking up a job, you know, like moving away for, let's say you move away for I don't know, for school, because like you said earlier, but there's sometimes there's schools that we want to go to because that's, you know, that offers like the best opportunities for us to learn a in like learn a certain major or something, right? So like making those decisions can change a whole lot in our routine, in our daily life, in you know, in like who we can surround ourselves with, right? Because there have been those who moved like to different states to pursue their another school. And like you can see sometimes that they're, you know, they're homesick because they I know they the change in their day-to-day life, not being able to see their parents every day, is like it's I know it's hard for them, right? And when you make that realization, it becomes like that's I know that's a challenge that I would say I've faced. You know, like I'm and the way that I sort of think is I sort of put my before I make a decision, I put myself in that scenario. Like let's say I want to go to this is just an example. I want to go to this I don't know, to this college that's like you know, a couple states away from where my parents are. Like if I take that up, I've already put myself in the decision that okay, I'm living far from my parents, you know, like, and I'm already seeing, you know, oh, I'm gonna miss not seeing my parents, gonna miss my mom's, you know, my mom's home cooking, you know, uh, like I'm gonna have to adjust to, you know, to being able to take care of myself, being able to hold myself accountable, like those kinds of things is what, you know, what I realize makes me afraid to commit to something. You know,
So you're afraid of change, which is everyone.
in a
Which everyone.
way.
Not to generalize. not to generalize though, right? But what I will say, I wouldn't say we're all afraid of it, but we have different levels of the way that we cope through change. That's what I'm understanding from the way that I hear your answer, and what I've witnessed, not just in myself but even some of my friends. Typically there's some kind of trade-off that comes. That's what I heard when I was listening to your answer, EJ. There's always going to be some kind of trade-off where when you come into a decision, you make the choice, there's typically something that you are going to invest in it in order to get something back, but you might have to sacrifice something
Yeah.
else, right? So a perfect example is like what you were talking about, like when you decide to move somewhere else, and you you decide to you're, let's say you've graduated, right? You graduated college, you've done the whole thing, you happen to be away from your parents. That can be, a hard thing to do. I know, my friends who graduated, they might live in a different state now, and that can be challenging, right? And there are ways to cope up with that, but it's kind of like you're picking your hearts a little bit in that way. One thing that I think of in terms of decision is, time. We only have a certain amount of time in a day, right, to allot to these different things that we have to attend to, right? So when you're making decisions, you kind of have to figure out, okay, if I'm going to take this thing on, do I really have the
The-
space here in terms of all the other things, right? Those are things that you kind of consider.
yeah.
It could be conflict of schedule, it could be conflict in terms of priorities, right? One other thing that does come to mind, because the stuff that you're mentioning of in terms of changes, when I think of changes, it's kind of like it's uncomfortable, right? It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable and you're not
Stepping
used
out
to
of
it.
your, I know, your comfort zone definitely too. I know. Like you
Yeah.
can't make the changes from inside that comfort zone.
Yeah, and that does put a damper sometimes in us being able to make that decision or commit to it, as you said, because we are thinking already of the unknown. We're thinking of possibilities of, oh, how is this going to work out? How is this going to turn out? And you won't really know until you make that decision, right? What I saw from Carolyn there in Team Live Chat, she said, I asked myself when making decisions, is it for good? Will it affect anyone else? Will the end result be happy? Will this benefit me? What's the cost? So that's a kind of good way to go about it, right? In terms of self-reflection. But it's a lot of things that we tend to consider when making decisions, not just that idea of change, but every aspect about our life, right? Depending on what point in your life you're at. Let's say someone who just got a new job and you're in a new city, right? In your new city from where you grew up, right? And this is your first time in this kind of job, and you're trying to figure out how to budget your, like, where am I going to live, right? You have to figure out your apartment or the place that you're going to stay at based off of the resources that you have, right? Sometimes we have to do that as well. When we make decisions, we have to think about, what do I currently have on hand, and what's possible in this moment based off of the things that I'm able to, I guess, in a way sustain myself, right? Those are adulting, like in terms of being an adult, right? Those are the things that we kind of think about, right? We have to think about what's on our plates, what are our resources, and then how do we work with those resources, right? Those are all external things that I can kind of think about in terms of what you mentioned, changes and our resources, maybe the idea of time. Another thing that I can think of, though, when it comes to decision making, is the opinion of other people,
Mm,
which, we the thing that I can think about is terms of career.
yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna keep going back to that, but that's something that I have heard a lot. When you decide to, I guess, go into some kind of field that maybe it's not the typical thing,
Mm.
not something that people are familiar with, and they're like, "Are you sure about that?" And then the
I
dialogue
do
just,
understand the concern. I would say I do
yeah,
understand the concern of like wanting someone that you care about have a more consistent, like a more consistent income, as opposed to, like, let's say careers that are sort of like the earn is like, or the salary of a career that's just based on like what
commission.
you, yeah, commission, what you can, I know, what you can provide, as opposed to like a more consistent more consistent income, right? I do understand that. I do understand the concern, but yes, that is definitely a factor that I would consider as well. And in terms of like challenges that someone makes when they're making a decision, it's one of those things that would make them fear committing to a certain career because of, like you said, what uh, others might might think if they say what I did notice, the friends I have that have taken those more like unconventional unconventional jobs, like the more commission based jobs. It's like they have that job as a kind of like a just a side gig. Like they
Like
kind of just do it on
photography
the side.
or like
Mhm.
art stuff with the arts, I think.
Yeah, like editing, what else? Photography, right? Uh, and other, other, like you said, other those other stuff, art stuff like that. Like they do it on the side, but they still have another job that's has a more consistent and a consistent outcome, or not outcome, income, more consistent income or source of income. But yeah, like it's I feel like it's that example, like being afraid to like fully commit to this something because of what others might think. Also, maybe because they're also or they're also affected of what others said about that. Oh, it's not consistent. You don't know. You might not get a commission. You might not get any work. You won't have the means to provide for yourself. Maybe that also has affected them in a way where, like, what, that's true. So I have to like I'll just put that like they might be passionate about it, but I'll just put that kind of as a a side gig, kind of just as a something I can do on the side while this is like my actual career. you know
Yeah, one of the things that I see there in Team Live Chat is also from Nathan. He put quitting a stable job for another is a tough decision. So kind of like what we've been speaking on. When you're talking about the commission type jobs, I was thinking of like those people who are artists maybe,
Mhm.
or photography, or even those who wedding
Wedding
fit
photography.
like videographers.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I can think of where it's kind of like your own business.
Mhm.
You're kind of dependent on that as opposed to a 9 to 5 job where you go to an actual place. And these are different things that people think about, right? These are different things that people think about whether to take on
Mhm.
or go for something like what he mentioned, what we think of as a more stable job. Now, we're not here to tell everyone, your decision is good or bad, right? This conversation is just to get us to think about the way that we make decisions and how we make decisions. What are we basing our decisions off of? So we've kind of addressed some of the things already in terms of what makes decision making difficult, right? There are a lot of different factors that go into it. We think about maybe comparisons too, right? A lot of external things, could be internal things, the commentary or the dialogue that we have with ourselves. But what has been a good decision that you made that you can confidently say you made, EJ? You're like, this was a good decision.
What or something that I wouldn't like really like I didn't never really regret it is joining radio in like hold on. I forgot what I was trying to know. I was trying to say. Oh, let me rephrase one out. But joining radio is definitely one of the best I know, one of the best decisions that I have made. Just in the way, not just in terms of like in the way that I've met and like I met a lot of people. I know a lot of people, but like go to I can be at a different district and I can say, oh, I know someone from here. I know someone from here from radio. But it also helped me in the aspect of being more outspoken, being more confident in like in terms of like public speaking. It's something that it's a skill that I picked up being on radio. At first I would say this, at first I was so afraid of joining radio. I was so afraid of appearing like on camera, so afraid of like speaking on camera. I think you kind of saw a little bit of it because we are in the same same satellite studio, right? Where I would negotiate with our producers, whoever's producing the episode. I would negotiate with them. Please don't make me host this this episode. Please don't make me host this episode. But it's like being pushed to to host like an episode, and I attribute this to our to Manly to Emmanuel and Diet for for giving me that opportunity to host, because it became an opportunity for me to grow as well, to be more more confident to to be to speak in public. It helped me with definitely helped me with my other duties, and uh it like, let's say in a situation now where they're like, oh, we don't have anyone to MC, and they ask me, like, I feel like I can say yes. I can confidently say yes because of like a skill that I picked up being on radio. I don't know if that answered your question, but
So what I'm gathering from your answer, EJ, is kind of related to what I want to share from what Kat mentioned there in Team Live Chat, because what I heard from you is that being able to take this position, this role, right? It gave you an opportunity to learn something that you were maybe not necessarily comfortable with in the beginning,
Mhm.
but in the end, of course, we don't always see it until it becomes retrospect, right? You benefited from it, and you were able to grow from it. And I want to bring that up because Kat mentioned there in Team Live Chat, taking a chance and being vulnerable in the area of side hustles and entrepreneurship can also be challenging. So that's an interesting word to bring up because we don't think about decisions to be vulnerable, but they are, right? They
Mhm.
are because often when we're making decisions, we have to make a choice. Again, we're speaking on a spectrum, right? Deciding what to eat for dinner is not super vulnerable. When we're talking about more serious life decisions that can impact us, that we don't know the outcome, we don't know what it's going to be like, we don't know how it's going to affect us quite yet, right? When we go to make that decision, it is a vulnerable state. It's a vulnerable state to be in just because of those other factors that are not in our control, right?
Mhm.
But we make that decision because it's something that we're aspiring towards. It's something that we want for our life, right? And we mentioned the different scenarios that can show up, for those who are going to college. And you think about that university where let's say it's been your dream for a long time to go there, but when you're making that decision, you start thinking about all of those different things. Like, am I going to be able to keep up with the curriculum? Am I going to be, how am I going to be among my peers? What's my rank going to be? Am I going to be good enough to sustain the full time that I'm there, right? And there's these different things that we consider when making these decisions that put us in that vulnerable state. But being able to make a good decision, what makes the decision good is if in the end that decision benefits us, right? It benefits us, and that we can, as we are working through it, we know that, okay, this is something that I'm growing in, right? This is something that isn't affecting my principles,
Mhm.
right? Or it's not going against anything that is maybe in terms of faith, maybe in terms of what you believe in, right? Something that doesn't affect you in terms of what your core is of your character, right? So I think about, like, for myself, in a recent decision I had to make, going back to the career thing, you start to think about a lot of the challenges that we spoke on earlier. But what the thing about decision making is that you don't really know it's a good decision until after you've made the decision,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Until after you made the decision. And sometimes when you have made a decision, right? Regardless of how it has ended up the result, right? We kind of have to own it. I think you mentioned the word earlier, accountability, right? We have to be accountable to the things that we decided on.
Mhm.
And let's say the decision may not have been the best decision, and we realize that afterward. Then the decision that comes after that is, okay, how am I going to correct this? How am I going to move forward and improve upon this decision that I didn't like that I did, right? And I think about, I guess, these different challenges that kind of affect us. And those are the things that we have to think about when we make these decisions, but not to the point of indecision. Am I making sense? Where we don't make a decision at all,
Yeah,
because
because
that's
we're
also,
afraid of we're afraid of like the changes, right? That it would
yeah, not just afraid of changes, but again, going back, I don't want to reiterate all of the different challenges that come with making a decision, but making a bad decision, it happens, but there are ways that we can move forward to still correct it, right? There are ways that we can. It's also, I bring that up because indecision is also not good for us as well, right? Because then you're stagnant, you're not moving, and if we allow those challenges to kind of sit on us to the point that we don't make a decision, that's also just as bad. That's also just as bad because we have to be firm on something, right? You're just like, oh, I'm just not gonna decide. I'm just gonna whatever,
or
right?
you try to wait for you try to wait for like the perfect timing or not the perfect time but the perfect opportunity, the perfect set of circumstances sometimes.
Hmm.
So you're like, okay, I'll wait for that, but the question is how long will that wait be? you know
Yeah, waiting
and
for something else to happen before
you brought
we.
up time earlier, right? About the like you feel like time is like limited, and and for I know for that I would say, like if you haven't, like it's not that you're supposed to rush into a decision, right? It's not that you're supposed to rush into a decision right away, but at least do something productive in the time that where you're still, I don't know, where you're still deciding on something. But don't just sit there and like, well, I don't know what decision to make, so I'm just gonna wait here, and you're not you're not doing anything. You're stagnant, right? Like do something that like let's say towards this this career, but like you're still deciding if you'll take up a certain career. Study up on the career, but like what kind of skills would help me in that career, or what uh, does this career entail, right? Because we talked about earlier about like the trade-offs, right? But like learn about the trade-offs as well. But it's the things that when you do make a decision to no, when you do make a decision to take it, you're already sort of prepared for it. But like, again, you won't know the actual, like you won't know what how it actually is until you're there. But at least you made preparations already. You've made use of the time where you were still deciding, right?
I like that you mentioned that because I've been guilty of that. That's something I've been guilty of in terms of making this. That's also the reason why I brought up indecision earlier, because one thing that I've gotten caught up with in making decisions is thinking about the stuff that I would miss out on when I make a decision, right? So let's say I'm picking between two different careers, and I'm like, I want to do both, but let's say there are certain circumstances where you can't do both. And I get caught up in that idea of what am I going to miss out if I pick this decision, and then vice versa, right? It's kind of hard to make a decision and be confident that you won't know what the outcome is for both. You'll only know what the outcome is for one when you make that decision. So the way that I've tried to work around it in terms of decisions that have been good for me, I'm grateful for the decisions that I've made regardless of the outcome, that I was like, okay, let's do it. I took a chance, or I took the opportunity. I'll say it in that way, because regardless of how it ended up, I feel confident that, okay, I took the chance. At least I tried, right? At least I tried, and then I can say to myself, the results, even if it didn't work out the way that I hoped it would, I'll own it. I'll
Mhm.
own it, and then backtrack as need be. I'll revise as need be. I'll rework it as need be. Because what I noticed in myself is that it's kind of like when I make a decision, I'm almost ready to beat myself up about it after it happens. Right? Like the what depending on how the outcome is. Of course, if you feel that it's worked out for you, typically we're happy about it, right? But
Mhm.
if I feel in myself maybe it didn't meet my expectations, right? That's another thing that we kind of think about is, oh, maybe it didn't meet your expectations. I think Nathan put that in live chat earlier. He was talking about, you know, leaving, I think it was leaving for the military, and he spent a year and a half preparing for it, right?
Mhm.
But he didn't get it. And he said, but he doesn't have any regrets because he learned a lot about himself. So, in making a decision, because a good decision is a good one when you can evaluate it in yourself, those different things that we kind of talked about, right? I think it was Carolyn who mentioned it earlier. For me, right? I'll give a scope of something that I experienced recently. So when I was figuring out how to go about accepting this position for work,
Mhm.
I was thinking about those things like, how is this going to affect my family? How is this going to affect my time or my different responsibilities? What is what are the benefits that come with this? And what are things that I'll have to adjust or potentially give up, right? And what made the decision easier was that idea of what Nathan brought up, because you can prepare and prepare and prepare as much as you want for the decision, but until you act on something, you won't know what the outcome is going to be. What's important is what we do after the decision, right? Because making a good decision, right, it's going to be subjective to you in the things that are important to you. That again, we go back to principles. What are your principles? What are your core values? Is this affecting those aspects of your life? Right? Of course, if it's affecting those aspects of your life negatively, like if it's affecting your family negatively, or your faith, things that you believe in, if it's affecting those things negatively, you're going to have to evaluate yourself, right?
Yeah.
Is this a good decision that I made, right? These are things that we think about. What's on the line? What are those stakes? But you have to decide that. You have to evaluate that in yourself. No one is going to be able to always tell you, oh, that was a bad decision. And then if it was a bad decision, you have to figure out yourself how to fix it after it, to realign back to those values, to realign back to what's important to you, what's on the line, what are your trade-offs,
And
right?
I do want to say, like, even if it doesn't work out, like, let's say you pursue something like what Nate pursued is like he tried to pursue the military, even if he didn't get in. Like, I would assume what he meant, like, he spent a year and a half preparing this, like, uh, in terms of like mental preparation and physical
Mm-hmm.
preparation, right? And he, even if he didn't get in, he's still there was still a like a very big benefit from that. Like, he built a good habit in terms of like self disciplining, in terms of physically keeping himself fit, right? To know to join, like it definitely didn't work out, right, in the end, but still there was something to gain from that. And that's a mindset I try to keep with with the decisions that I try to make now. It might seem impulsive from an outside perspective, right? For me to just say yes to every opportunity. Well, maybe not every, to a lot of the opportunities that come my way. Uh, like, it might seem impulsive, but there's a lot more thought, a whole lot more thought that went into it. And uh, it all falls down to, even if it doesn't work out, then I try to evaluate, well, what did I gain from this? Because it's easy to think of just the negative when we feel like our expectations weren't met, right? Be it's easy to be sad when it doesn't work out our way, because we might be too focused on, oh, it didn't work out, I didn't reach my goal, I didn't get uh to a point where I wanted to be. But we sometimes, because of that, we sometimes neglect, or we sometimes forget to look at what did we gain, right? I can say that oh, I'm not the host that I want to be, on radio. I can say that I'm not as as good of a host as I want to be. But still, compared to when I started, it's like, it's not, what's how do you say this in English? It's not it's not even comparable to how I was when I first started. Like, you can't even compare the level that I'm at now to the level that I was back then. If I made that comparison in myself, and that's something I try to remind myself more of, like, now. It's like, it's like you didn't walk away with nothing. Like, when you make that reflection afterwards, even if it doesn't work out, you still have to remember, well, what did I gain? Right?
That's a great mindset. I'm glad that you brought that up, EJ, because that's a great mindset to have when we think about decisions. Because it's a callback to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, you know, I see Joy, she put there regrets. I think regrets is something that has come up in the comment section quite a bit. When we
Mhm.
think about decisions, we think about, am I going to regret this, right? Am I going to, what is going to be the loss, right? We think about those losses, but you also think about what your gains are. Even if it didn't, that decision in terms of where you wanted to go to school, if you didn't end up at the college that you wanted to because for whatever reasons you had to pick something else. Okay, but what did I gain out of it, right? What did I gain instead? In Nathan's example with the military, it didn't work out, but what did he gain instead? And it makes me think about control in a way, because when I think about decisions that I've had to make for myself, sometimes what it has felt like is that I don't have control when my expectations for said decision didn't work out. It feels like things aren't going to work out when you feel the decision fell through or it didn't turn out the way that you wanted to. But even when it doesn't turn out the way that you wanted to, when you made a decision, like let's say you made a decision to be a certain career and it didn't work out. We, like what you said, in that terms of that mindset, sometimes the on the other end, when we think about positive, sometimes we get in that negative of, oh, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? This thing didn't work out. But there's always choices. There are always choices that we can make. And I bring that up because the reason why, what helped me make the decision about my recent career, I said my prayers, right? As a Christian, I said my prayers and everything. And then I remember seeing a post on social media to be grateful about the choices that we have, because not everybody has the choices that we have or the opportunities that we have. And that's ultimately where I was like, I sat back and I was like, okay, I'm going to go for this. And granted, this position, there were a lot of things that I don't want to detail it, but there were a lot of things that were challenging about it. Not necessarily for me personally, but inherently in taking that position. I in a way I was kind of at a disadvantage because of, we think of, I didn't have a lot of the resources that I needed for this. But the reason why I took it was thinking of that idea of, I don't know if I'll get an opportunity like this. So I should take it now and then see how it goes. Because I've already said my prayers. And going into it after that, I was like, I'm gonna do this. And it's been working out so far, even though it's not perfect, right? It's been hard. There are things that I've been going through where I'm like, ooh, okay. But you work through it. You find ways to work through it because you want to own the decision that you made. And I felt confident about it because, like I said my prayers. It didn't conflict with anything that, is important to me. My core values, my principles, faith, right?
Mhm.
And even though it may have been hard, the results of the decision may have been hard. I'm working through it. I'm grateful that I was able to have that experience because now it makes me feel braver to take on other things, to try other decisions, and knowing that maybe at first it doesn't, and that decision doesn't end up how you think it's supposed to, but you always have the opportunity to rework things, right? It's not always permanent in that respect. There's some things that are non-negotiable, right? Like what you mentioned earlier. We're not married, so I don't want to speak too much on that, but that's something more permanent. But in terms of like our lifestyle of your career, of your education, there are always ways that we can recover or try again, right? We can always try again. We can always, as long as we're alive, right? As long as we're alive and we have that opportunity, there are different ways that we can seize these decisions and then rework it afterwards. As long as it's not compromising, like what I said, what's important to us, what are our values. I keep going back to that because ultimately that's one of the things that we consider in our mindset of making good decisions.
Mhm.
Because what's the point of making a decision if it's going to compromise all of the things that are all of the
Yeah,
things that are
speaking of,
important
I
to
know,
us?
diba, speaking of like the trade-offs, it's the one thing that you wouldn't trade off,
Yeah,
right? For I know, for
because then
anything.
it would just make you miserable, right? Like if you're going into a decision and you realize that, oh, this is going to affect something that's really important to me, then why would you make that decision, right? But if the conversation is more around, oh, I'm uncomfortable because this is new, I'm uncomfortable because I'm thinking, I don't know if I'm good enough, or going back to that idea of vulnerability, right? When I
Mhm.
think about how I always say this, not everyone's gonna keep me accountable whenever I say whenever I say this. I want to write a book, right? That's something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And it's a decision that I'm firm on, but it requires that sense of vulnerability of being able to put yourself on the table and say like, okay, if I'm going to do this, this is what this decision will require me to do. And being comfortable with that is not always easy because it'll feel hard. You'll get in your feelings and you're like, I don't know. You go through the process and you're like, is this really right? Is this really the thing? But sometimes we just have to kind of push past that mentally because sometimes it can be ourselves that are stopping us from seeing that decision through, like giving up at the first sign of trouble or giving up at the first sign of you know pushback.
Mhm.
When I think about, because Kat brought up side hustles earlier, that's a hard thing to do, to build up a business, to to kind of figure out and work out all the logistics that come with that stuff is hard. But if that's a decision that you're set on doing, being able to have that mindset of not just knowing what you're going to get into, that's important to prepare, right?
Mhm.
But also anticipating the stuff that you don't know that you're going to run into. And are you going to be okay with those things, or being able to get yourself to push past those walls so that you can hit the thing that you're trying to achieve?
When you mentioned like hesitation at the first sign of trouble, it made me think of like comparison, right? Because I feel like that's another big factor that makes people sort of like hesitate when they're I know when they're making a decision, like will I be as good as I know, will I be good enough, will I be like and of course a lot of it is like what we are able to see, on social media, on like even just on the different platforms. You can't really avoid like not coming across, like influencers in a certain field, right? So when you do make that, I know, when you do make that comparison, when you compare yourself to that person, think of it in this way, that like how many times did they also feel like giving up, right? Before they were able to meet their goal. How many times did they have that moment of hesitation, like should I make this, I make this decision, so should I go through with this, like let's say that this person that you're admiring is the best in that field, right? They weren't born the best. They might have had talent, but you know like we said, like I always say, talent only takes you so far. Talent can only take you so far. There were still some things that they struggled with. There were still, they still had those moments of like I feel like I want to give up, but you know they didn't give up. That's why they became the best in that field, right? So if you're pursuing that, let's say you really want to be in that career, right? It's like, why would you give up at the first time travel? Why would you give up at when you're, why would you give up when the thing that's stopping you is, oh, I'm uncomfortable because this is something new, you
I
know?
brought it up because I was talking about myself each
Oh,
day. I was definitely
I hope
talking
that's
about
I
myself.
hope that's that doesn't seem like I know, like I'm judging you on that, but
No. I didn't think so. I just wanted to put that out there, that I brought it up because I was talking about myself.
but I do hope that I know. I do hope that that brings more of a, at least a different perspective, right? More of a different perspective. Like I know, like compare, because I comparison is something that I notice a lot of people, especially I would say in our generation, maybe in the newer generation, because of the emergence of like social media, right? Like it's easy to make that comparison when you can see other people's success, right? And if you do make that comparison, it's unavoidable to kind of make a comparison, because even if you're aware, sometimes you kind of do it subconsciously. You kind of make a comparison subconsciously, but when you like, so the way that I deal with it now is like make that shift when I make the comparison. It's not, oh, will I be able to be there? It's that, oh, this person struggled to get to that point where they're so proficient in that career, right? They also had times where they wanted to give up. They also had their doubts in the beginning, right? But now they're the best in that field. So what does that I know like what does that say about me? It's like I can also be there because I also have my doubts. I also have my like times where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can keep up with this. But times where it will be challenging, right? And even if it doesn't work out, then I switch to the other mindset that I have like earlier. Oh, well, what did I gain then, right?
What I will say from what you've said, EJ, is the importance of asking the right questions. Because, and it was Carolyn who brought it up earlier, that idea of self-reflection,
Mm.
being able to ask yourself questions, but not in a way that will paralyze you, not in a way that will stop you from doing what you need to do, but asking questions in terms of assessing that decision, right? Not asking questions like, oh, am I going to be as good enough as so and so? Oh, am I going to, you know, That's one question that you could ask yourself, or you could ask yourself, what are the things that I need to do to get there? What is going to be required of me to make good of this decision?
Mhm.
Actionable things, right? It's not a conversation just to have in your head, but it's almost kind of like planning. It's like mental planning, right? But again, being able to ask yourself the right questions. Is this decision going to be good for my life? And you break that down. What is this decision going to affect? Will this negatively affect my family? Will this negatively affect my principles or my character or the things that I want for my life? And you weigh those things, right? And decision making is a hard thing. If picking what we want for dinner is hard, how much more so
And
other big things,
mhm.
like the things that we've mentioned in today's broadcast. There are a lot of mental blocks, if I can say that can go into it. But we have to ask ourselves the right questions when we're making a decision. Not the ones that will paralyze us, but the ones that will help us assess what's on the line when we need to make a decision. And then making sure that we actually make a decision, not something that's half hearted or not something that isn't firm. We make a decision, right? And in that mindset of whatever happens with this decision, I will own the consequences and rework as I need to rework, right? But again, keeping in mind that at the end of the day, a good decision is a decision that doesn't compromise what our principles are and what's important to us, especially as Christians, right? So, for those who are listening, decision making is hard. It can be hard. I won't say it's always hard, but it can be hard, right, EJ? A lot
Mm.
of the stuff that we've talked about today, decision making happens all the time. Sometimes it's stuff that happens quickly. Sometimes it's stuff that happens over time that can take time. But we hope that this conversation has been a conversation that helps you evaluate how you make good decisions, to get you to think a little bit more intentionally, a little bit more thoroughly about the decisions that you're going to make. And we hope that you can walk away from this conversation a little bit more confident in the decisions that you want to make for your life. So we hope that everyone who's listening to this, we do what we can to prepare when we make the decisions. Say your prayers, have confidence in God as Christians, and above all, make a decision. don't don't be indecisive, right? Don't be indecisive, but say your prayers. And if you find that the decision that you made is not ideal, rework. Don't be afraid to rework and hold yourself accountable to it and find a way to fix it. What can I do to change this? Right?
Mhm.
And keep trying again and try again. So that's been our broadcast for today. I don't know if you have anything else, EJ, but it's already
Just to add like a little bit to what you and to reiterate something that you said, but as long as as long as you're alive, as long as you have every day that you're alive is an opportunity, right? If it doesn't work out, then like you said, rework, do something else. And the last thing I want to say is just an advice that I got from my parents is that it's pray, trust, then go. You pray, you trust that your prayer has already been answered, and then you go with the decision that you made. Right?
I like that. That's a nice way to end the broadcast. Pray, trust, go. We hope all of you are able to do that today after listening to our talk. So thank you for listening to INC Radio Chat Line. We hope this has been a conversation that has mattered to you, and we'll see you again next week. Bye, everyone.
This is
Have a
what
great
I
weekend.
ask. Always dwell in the temple of the Lord till I bring my last.
Are you planning on relocating to